Good morning. We bid you welcome. We do not ask what you believe or expect you to think a certain way, but only that you try to live a kindly, helpful life with the dignity proper to a human being. Welcome, all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions. Welcome, all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living. Good morning and welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. My name is Ellen Greenya and I'm chair of the Building and Grounds Committee. I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors today. After the service, we'll socialize at the back of the meeting house. When indoors, we are observing COVID precautions and wearing masks regardless of vaccination status. If you are visiting us for the first time and you are comfortable doing so, please stand and tell us where you're from and how you heard about us. We would like to meet you. Religious education classes are being held in the social hall during the service. An usher can direct you to that location if needed. Due to COVID precautions, we ask that if you have a joy or sorrow you'd like to share, please fill out a blue card and give it to an usher, and it will be read later in the service. You can also text me. My number is in the order of service, ending in 5855. Please include your name in the text in case I don't recognize your number. As we begin our service, we remember that our UU principles begin with our pledge to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome into our community people of all races, sexual orientations, gender identities, and belief systems. Please share the affirmation of the mission of UUCF with me. It's found on the second page of your celebration of life. Seek answers everywhere. Include everyone. Live with compassion. I have one announcement that was handed to me. The UUCF Chalice Circle group will meet a week from tomorrow, Monday evening, November 22nd, here at UUCF at 6:30 p.m. in the Marge Brown Room. Our discussion subject will be faith and doubt, living with polarities, similar to this morning's sermon topic. All are welcome. For more information, contact George Rourke, Barb Eglinton, or Dennis Monti. Does anyone have any other announcements they'd like to share? Thank you.
Our opening hymn this morning is Breaths by Sweet Honey in the Rock, and I just want to share some information about it. It's based on a poem by Barago Diop, who was a West African born in Senegal, and they were a Senegalese poet and recorder of traditional folk tales and legends of the Wolof people. And they're the ones who wrote Breaths. And it was put to music by Dr. Issei Maria Barnwell, who's a musician, composer, singer, and teacher, and also is a member of All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C., and a member of the musical group Sweet Honey in the Rock. It's number 1001 in the Teal hymnal, and I encourage you to read it there. I printed 2 of the 3 stanzas in the order of service, so you'll be a little lost if you just read it out of the order of service. So I encourage you to look at it on the Teal hymnal, and the choir, some members of the choir are going to lead us in the song. Our reading this morning is entitled Delicious Ambiguity, and it's by the Reverend Marisol Caballero, who's a Unitarian Universalist minister. This is what she writes. How is it that I, a minister and known skeptic, am able to not run around screaming that the sky is falling and do my job at all? This question perplexes those belonging to religious traditions that offer comfort in the form of certainty. For some, answers to life's toughest questions offer reassurance that there is an order in this chaotic world and in our sometimes chaotic lives. For others, such as myself, the great mystery does not cause panic, but instead eases my mind, reminding me that I don't have to understand or know everything, that we are all just feeling our way through this life together. No one is an expert. Which, for those who expect a minister to be an expert at all things crucial and who look to clergy to get them through the most difficult days of their lives with reassuring certainties, I would definitely not be the one to call on. As a chaplain, I once had a patient who was dying. Though he was unable to speak, he would communicate by writing on a legal pad. He told me he was afraid. I asked him what he was afraid of. He wrote, "I've never done it before." This patient was deeply Catholic, yet I knew him well enough to understand that his honesty about the unknown was more a request to witness the reality of his anxiety rather than to disabuse him of it. Questions of the hereafter have always struck me as the easiest to enjoy for their ambiguity. It's almost as if I don't want any spoilers on the surprise adventure that awaits me after I die. Lately, however, it seems that so much of our living world, the here and now, is more topsy-turvy than usual. It's a human spiritual need to want to make sense out of the events of our lives. We not only want but need life's unexpected changes to have a deeper meaning. If not a perfect ending or poems that rhyme, we would at least appreciate a clear beginning, middle, and end every once in a while. It's much harder to treat daily ambiguities as adventures we should face with excitement, especially as big changes seem to have a way of raining down all at once. The longer I live, the more I am taught the same lesson over and over by wildly different circumstances. The more I expect the unexpected, the more I roll with the punches of life's tragedies and revel in life's joys and victories. The more I give in to the reality that I am not as in charge of and cannot plan as much of this life as I would like, the more I can fully experience and even come to enjoy the deliciousness of my journey's ambiguity. It's good to be with you on this morning. This is my first Michigan snowfall, and it's quite beautiful. Just about everyone dislikes the feeling of not knowing the answer to an important question about what's going to happen in the future. Generally speaking, waiting to hear whether you'll get an important job or find out about a loved one's diagnosis after a medical test is a uniquely anxiety-provoking experience. It's not uncommon to hear people mired in these sort of limbos say that they'd prefer hearing about a terrible outcome than continue waiting to find out. That way, at least they'd know. A potent form of psychological tension would be released. Jamie Holmes is a fellow at the New America Foundation and the author of a book, Nonsense: The Power of Not Knowing. He says if there's any takeaway from his research, it's that we're programmed to get rid of ambiguity. And yet if we engage with it, we can make better decisions, we can be more creative, and we can even be a little more empathic. Holmes is quick to point out that the feeling of ambiguity isn't inherently negative. It's not always unpleasant. It's more that uncertainty is an emotional amplifier. A lot of times it is threatening just because of the content of what we happen to be facing, whether you're going to be fired from your job or a physical threat or the uncertainty of a medical diagnosis. But there's also great research that shows if we're uncertain about whether someone's romantically interested in us, or if we're uncertain about whether something good or really good might happen to us, those experiences are even more pleasurable than they otherwise would be. His book highlights the many ways embracing ambiguity can make people more creative and better problem solvers. But it's the other side of the ledger that feels a bit more urgent. History, recent and otherwise, is replete with examples of catastrophic blunders made as a result of leaders' inability to deal with ambiguity. As he explains, it's when we're stressed out, particularly when we're faced with what we feel are existential threats, that our resistance to ambiguity grows strongest. For Americans, 9/11 appears to have a unique ability to ramp up our need to resolve ambiguity. One study showed that simply reminding Americans of 9/11 increased their need for cognitive closure, an important psychological concept measuring, to put it roughly, one's level of comfort with ambiguity. The entire need for closure of the country went up, and any uncertainty in general became more unpleasant. He doesn't view it as a stretch to say that the invasion of Iraq, which was broadly supported by Americans when it first occurred, can be partly attributed to the country's need for a simple story of good and evil at a time of great fear and uncertainty. Maggie Dugan is an innovation facilitator and creativity consultant. She states, the human mind is, for the most part, set on being in the know. We don't like being uncertain or confused. We seek answers and explanations. A pattern we can recognize to make sense of what's happening around us. In the face of an elusive solution or a murky, messy problem, a lot of people are ill at ease. This discomfort has driven invention and innovation for centuries. The need to understand and clarify and find answers has opened the door to all sorts of advancements, especially in science and technology. In the long term, it's served us well. But in the short term, it can be a liability. It's exactly this drive to know, absolutely, that can get in the way of innovation. Makes us inclined to latch on to an answer too quickly rather than live in the uncertainty for a bit longer, to see if a more suitable or interesting response is still at hand. Unknowingly, we can trade possibility for certainty. There's rarely anything novel about certainty. It often happens in workshops, in classrooms, and congregations. About halfway through, the organizers or teachers get restless. The participants or students appear fatigued and frustrated. We should be further ahead by now, is what they're thinking. It is usually in this moment of feeling blocked or stalled that there's a fierce temptation to turn back or to seize the nearest reasonable solution in order to make some progress. It might make us feel like we're advancing, but in truth, the best course of action in those patchy moments is to stay in the fog a little bit longer. We need to tolerate ambiguity. It means staying in uncertainty, staying with the question, despite the discomfort of not knowing the answer or not knowing where we're headed. It requires relinquishing control, even though a solution isn't always guaranteed, to make room for new and emerging connections to crystallize into a clear direction. It also means accepting the fact that there might be numerous ways of answering the same question, each with different but potentially positive results. In a study about the relationship of ambiguity, tolerance, and playfulness with creativity, Associate Professor at the University of Tennessee, Deborah Tagano, suggests that implicit in the description of ambiguity tolerance is its association with creativity. It's kind of academic speak, but she writes, individuals who are intolerant of ambiguity are described as disinclined to think in terms of probability and have been found to solve problems without adequate information. Ambiguity tolerance may be the willingness to accept a state of affairs capable of alternate interpretations or alternate outcomes. In other words, ambiguity tolerance may be a critical link in operationalizing a measurable and understandable personality trait which is central to creative thinking. Ambiguity tolerance is central to creative thinking. It makes sense that if you can stand to hover in the gray area between black and white, you might get to a more creative outcome. How do we cultivate this tolerance for ambiguity? Here's some tips. We stay neutral and suspend judgment. Delay as long as you can the expression of an opinion, positive or negative, about the topic of discussion or exploration. Don't get distracted by the process either. Take it all in as interesting data. Stay curious. Seek to understand the things that would otherwise induce a judgment. Avoid assumptions. Try to take on an open-minded, curious stance about what's happening around you. Ask questions that start with why and say things like, tell me more about that. Enjoy the mess. The creative process is rarely neat and tidy. Consider this an opportunity that allows you to be messy. The whole world is constantly demanding you put things in order. Give yourself permission to let them stay out of order in service to a possibly more innovative outcome. Take time. The world that's asking for order is demanding speed as well. Slow things down and take your time to look at them for longer, to ask more questions than you'd normally permit yourself. Generate more ideas and opinions before selecting among them. And try things on. Play with questions and ideas and concepts. Try them on for size. Follow threads of thought, pretend something might work, and see where it takes you. Live temporarily with possible options to see if they are useful or not. It's easy to get frustrated by the lack of clarity and certainty, or annoyed by too many questions and not enough answers. In fact, that's what usually happens when you're right on the threshold of a breakthrough. It may sound cliched, and maybe it is, but it's when you have to trust the process. If you can cultivate the capacity for ambiguity tolerance, you don't try to shortcut the creative process. It will produce novel insights and distinct opportunities for innovation. Now, my thoughts personally on a daily basis are often on politics, national and local and global, and everything I read or think I somehow relate back to politics, political developments. I won't be strained too far to see the politics of hate and hatred often come from personalities that are unable to tolerate ambiguity. As the Looney Tunes character Foghorn Leghorn was fond of saying, "Don't bother me with facts, son. I've already made up my mind." I'm not the first person to observe this. Theodor Arno, who's a German philosopher and a leader of the Frankfurt School and a critical theorist, he wrote that intolerance of ambiguity is the mark of an authoritarian personality. He wrote a book, The Authoritarian Personality, in 1950, and consisted of qualitative interpretations that uncovered authoritarian characters by testing persons through indirect questions. And the book has had a major influence on sociology and remains highly discussed and debated. So let that be a final motivation for you to improve your tolerance of ambiguity. Don't be an authoritarian. That's all. Let us share in a moment of stillness and silence together, and to open to the possibilities and to seek answers everywhere, as is our mission here. May it ever be so. Amen. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this, and therefore commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received.
A perfect heart is one that has known love and loss, joy and sorrow. The perfect heart is one that has been shared. As joys and sorrows of our community are shared, please direct your energy, prayers, and meditations as a gift of compassion and strength. Please join us for the closing hymn in your hymnal, number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
poet David White writes, "Be impatient with easy explanations. Teach that part of the mind that wants to know everything, not to begin questions it cannot answer." May you go in peace.